Hello, I'm Lizzie Harper from www.lizzieharper.co.uk, and today I'm going to be talking you through doing a botanical illustration of a sweet pea which is growing in my garden. Okay, so now I need to decide which of these sweet pea flowers from my hedge I'm going to draw. See, most of them have got, well, not all of them, but most of them have got two flowering heads, and I do like the leaves and I do like a good tendril, but they need to be at the right sort of angle for me to want to draw them. So this one here is about right because I can see that one full face on, and the one behind is less important. But I'm also going to include a little bit of information. This is some tendrils and leaves. So here we go. I'm going to draw the flower to start with. So this is the flower I want to draw. That big scoop. I'm not going to do it too big because this is a sort of demo, so I don't want to be spending the whole day painting this. Okay, there we go, up like that, and then this bit curves around like that. This bit comes up. Got to make sure you keep them in proportion so it curls around that bit. That's about right. And then it itself curves like that. It's quite elegant actually, that's rather nice. Okay, and then this here is much softer because it's folded over inside. And what's going on under there? There's another bit of petalage. I'm not sure what's happening there. Okay, right, okay, so then there's a bit of green here which must be the sepals. Plot them in. Oh, and it pops out here as well. What's the bottom of this bit do? That just comes curving round. Okay, that's all fine. And then this other half of the big keel. Big curves are really difficult to do. I always say when I'm teaching, try really hard just to do one line. Here comes the rubber. Oh, look, Factis rubber. They're really nice. Good and soft, and they erase very cleanly. But don't get rainwater on them, or they do not erase cleanly. No rubber will. But yeah, I always say do one line instead of loads if you can possibly help it, because it just adds clarity and it means you know what you're doing. Often little scrappy lines where you do the same line over and over again, it doesn't really help anything. Okay, there we go. So that's good. That's plotted in. And then this, I'm going to put this in. I'm changing the angle slightly because I don't much like the way it's coming out. What'll I do? I'm going to move it slightly over, but that's all right. Okay, so that goes like that, and it comes down like that. That's fine. And then follow the plant through, and it gives us this as well, which is nice. Okay, so that's fine. Now you've got to get the stem in. So where does it join? It joins just here. A good trick for drawing a straight line is keep your pencil on the paper and just look where you're going. Look at a point, which is where you're aiming for, and then you can keep your line nice and consistent and straight. So I think that's drawn. That pencil drawing will do for now. No, I'm not even going to put the suggestion of the veins and things in because I can do that with a paintbrush. Okay, so now I'm ready to put some paintwork in. I think I'll add the leaf later. Before I start doing my painting, I ought to talk you through my equipment. So this is a mechanical pencil. It's a Pentel P205. This is a 0.5mm lead, and it's lovely because you get a nice sharp point, and you don't have to worry about sharpening it. You can just break it on the paper and it'll be sharp again. The rubbers I use, this is Factis, just nice and soft and good and reliable. Brushes, the only ones I ever use are Series 7, which are made by Winsor & Newton. This is quite a new one, and it's number 1. And they do, over time, they shed their brushes. So this is one that I've been using for a couple of years. But they're just consistently very, very good. They hold a lot of paint, and they hold their point, which is the most important thing. Paper I'm using, I'm currently using Fluid 100 by Global Arts, which I like. Used to use Fabriano, it went off the boil. There's lots more videos about paper choice on my YouTube channel if you wish to pursue them. Paints, that's my paint box. mostly Winsor & Newton. They're pan colours. I tend to top them up from the tube, which you're really not meant to do, but it doesn't seem to create any trouble for me. And occasionally I'll supplement them with other colours like Opera Rose, which again is Winsor & Newton. And I love this pink, but it's very fugitive. It fades really fast. And also Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus Fine Art Watercolour Inks. And this one is oh my goodness me, let me try again. Quinacridone Magenta, and it's a gorgeous colour, and you can mix it in with your other watercolours. Okay, so the first thing to do is to mix up the right pink, and it's quite a crazy pink. This is the Opera Rose, which as you can see is not the right shade at all, but with a little... Oh, you can't quite see what I'm doing. Okay, there we go. With a little mix of, this is Cobalt Blue. Takes far too much purple, but look, can you see it getting closer? Keep on mixing, keep on mixing. To make a paint paler in colour, I always suggest diluting it with water. If you mix it in with a white watercolour or anything, it becomes quite chalky and quite unpleasant. That looks to me pretty damn close, to be quite honest. Sometimes with leaves, I will paint the paint actually onto the specimen to see whether or not it matches, but I'm not going to do that in this case. So this is just Opera Rose with a little bit of Cobalt Blue. As we go along, I'm more than likely to mix in a few little bits of purple, which are here. Purple Lake and, don't know what colour that one is. Ooh, probably ought to look it up. But anyway, we'll get to that when we get to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is paint in these veins. So you have to look very carefully all the time at what you're doing. There's a whole network of these little veins all over the petal. So I'm going to do a few. I'm not going to make you guys sit through it as I do the whole lot, because I think there really is not a great deal to be said for watching paint dry, literally. But you do need to look really carefully and think about what's going on. So of course there are loads of veins everywhere, because these are these slightly darker veins. They're what's taking the nutrients from the plant to every part of it, and into the flowers as well. So of course they're going to be there, and of course they're going to be slightly darker than the tissue which joins them together. But it's a very specific network, and you need to get those patterns right. You need to really concentrate. So I'm doing these with that purple that I've just mixed up. And once I've got the structure of these down, what I'll do is I'll do a top wash, but this is going to take me some time, I should think. But what a nice and mindful way to spend time, hey? Especially when it's pouring with rain outside. Even the sparrows are sounding cross today. It's meant to be June. It's cold. Okay, just keep looking. They say that you should be looking at what you're drawing at least 80% of the time, and I think that's pretty true, possibly even more, I would say. So quite often I will actually be drawing or painting, and I won't really be looking at the page particularly at all. You're just looking very hard at what you're drawing, and it's almost like with your eyes. Oh gosh, messed up there. It's almost like with your eyes. Always have a piece of tissue paper on hand. It's almost like with your eyes, you follow the veins or whatever it is across the page, and then you translate that into what's coming out of your brush in your hand. And always with these veins, make sure you observe and follow the line of growth, because that really is what makes it look realistic, is, you know, making sure that it makes sense biologically as well as visually. So yeah, so I'm going to keep doing this until the two main petals are done, and I'll get back to you when I'm finished. Okay, so you can see that I've worked my way around all the petal here, doing the network, and I've made it a little heavier towards the edges with lots of tiny lines, and I've actually even done a discrete line showing where the edges are. That's quite useful because it means that your eye is kind of grounded. It knows where your darks are. What I'm going to do now is do a similar thing with this bit here, and to do this I'm going to use the same mix that we did before, but I'm going to add a bit of a blue purple to it. And I'm going to do it in a different, because I'm probably going to use that purple again. So I'm going to do it in a different little bit here. And I don't want it to be massively different. I just want it to be very slightly darker so that it becomes obvious which, you know, that the other flower is behind the one that we're focusing on. That'll do, I think. So it's going to be more of the same for this. It's going to be holding up the flower and just plotting in those little details. I hope you can see. I hope I'm not in an annoying angle for you. Funny thing about painting on camera is you have to kind of wriggle your body around the camera so that you can get at what you're painting. And also I do an awful lot of, I didn't realise until I was still started filming myself, but I do an awful lot of moving of the page around. And of course, if you're filming, that's not really so useful because your poor viewers are left wondering where on earth you've got to. Let me double check that this is on. Yes, this is on the screen. Well, that's good. So here we go. And this is, again, following the line of growth. Very, very gentle touch. And can you see what I mean about these brushes, these Series 7? They're just, even though the nib itself is not that tiny, it just holds that point. It doesn't splay, and the brush itself holds plenty of paint. I mean, you know how they say a bad workman blames his tools. I mean, that is true. But somebody who's lucky enough to be okay at what they do, I thank my tools. If without these brushes, I wouldn't be nearly as good as I like to feel that I'm getting. And they just really help. Right tools for the job. And do also be careful. It's very easy to stop looking and to be like, oh yeah, I know how that goes. And it's awful. It's very unforgiving because the minute you do that, you start making really quite obvious mistakes. Where did I do it here? Yeah, just about here I did it. And it's just like, well, yeah, obviously you've stopped looking and obviously you've messed it up. If you've got the thing in front of you, if you're fortunate enough to have the specimen in front of you, you know, make use of it. It's giving you all the information you need. You just need to remember to focus. Here I'm doing that thing I was telling you about, of just making it slightly heavier towards the edges. Literally just tiny little brush marks which anchor themselves on the outside edge. And if it sounds like I can't breathe, it's because I've found not recently, but often if you're doing very delicate work when you paint, you find that you do stop breathing. I thought it was just me, but somebody else pointed it out to me. And the more stressful the thing is, like if it's a really, really long straight line or something, you'll find that you don't breathe at all. Very silly. Okay, so that comes around like that. Okay, so that's plotted in. Now these other bits are a much, much darker colour. So I'm gonna, let me hold up my paint box so you can see what I'm up to. So what am I going to use for that? Ooh, it's a very dark red. So I'm going to start with some of this, which is alizarin crimson. And I'm going to add some of this bluish purple. I tried to see what colour it was, but I haven't written it down anywhere, so that's really unhelpful. But by itself, look, I'll show you over here because you probably know more than I do. By itself, it makes that kind of bluish purple. It's a nice colour. Okay, that's 2 purple, and I want some of that opera pink in there. Opera rose, I always call it opera pink. So, okay, let me compare it. Nah, not red enough. So more of this alizarin crimson. Is that going to be too red? Might be too red, or it might not be dark enough. That's not bad, is it? What do you reckon, guys? I think that's probably okay. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did. Yeah, exactly the same thing as I did before, which is just pick out the pick out the veins and the shapes and the structure. Okay, so I've got to put the flower the other side of the thing that the camera's being held on. Okay. And again, you've got to think about the structure of this. So this it's coming up and round. It's growing from here and it's curling out, so that line of growth, kind of like that. And you need to remember, if there are pale areas or paler areas, like right on the on the perimeter here there's a paler area, you have to leave them white, because once with watercolour, once you cover an area with paint, it's almost impossible to get it looking white and glowing again. And that, of course, is what we're after. That's what's so lovely about the transparency and the translucency of watercolour, is you allow the light of the page, the light of the paper, to sort of glow through the paint. Looking at the lights and darks on this bit here, seems to me there's a much pinker bit just under here and a much darker bit just above it, so let's try and use that information. Not go too dark just there. I'll come back and do some more pink work down there, I think. Just making sure. Ooh, there's a whole network. Doing the right sort of thing. And I'm not taking these all the way at the edges because it's a little bit paler on the edges here. I've got to get around this corner. Following the line of growth, always following that line of growth. And looking all the time. There we go. And I'm leaving this bit pale, as I say, because it's quite kind of white almost. And the underside, the underside's white, so I'll leave that for now. And then on this side I'm going to do the same. And again, I'm going to lie here. Oh, shocking news. But I'm going to lie because I want it to be clear that these two are overlapping. But look, if you look at the actual specimen up close, can you see where that abuts that, where those two touch, there's very little distinction in the colour. But I need that colour to be distinct, otherwise you won't understand the structure of the flower. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this outside edge here a little paler than it is, and then we'll bring it in later, but hopefully it'll mean that you can distinguish between the two different petals, two different curved parts. And again, the curvature is vital here in separating these two areas. Obviously, the less pressure you apply with your brush, the thinner the line is. The more pressure, the thicker the line is. So as you complete your brush stroke, push a little harder where you want it to be a little darker. There we go. That needs to be slightly bulked up, that far edge here. So again, same colour, just another line over what's already been drawn. And I'm going to put in a... Oh, I wanted that line to be thinner. Whoops, still, never mind. It'll do. That'll do, pig. Right, now, we get, and these bits in here, they're darker yet. They're even darker because they're in the shadow. So I'm going to make them more solid. But again, I need to make absolutely certain that you can tell them apart. So can you see I'm leaving a very tiny little white line just there. And then I'm going to do something similar with this one. And also leaving white between those two, so they can be distinguished from each other. So I really am just blocking it in here. I'm not doing veins or anything. I just want it to read as the darkest of the darks. Just like that. And what's going on just there? Oh, you've got some pink behind there. Well, that's unhelpful. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so that's all right. And then we've got similar thing going on out here. So I'll do that and then I'll get back to you guys. Okay, so the next bit we need to do is here, this foldy over bit. Here. So I'm going to use the same colour mix that I did up here, but with a tiny bit more pink and diluted with a tiny bit of white because it's slightly paler. And there isn't really a network of veins or anything going on here, so I'm just going to have to wing it and see what's going on. It's quite pale. It's a tint of yellow where it goes down to the sepals, the green part. So I'm just going to plot those in. See if I can get a sense of the curve of it and the softness of that petal folded over in on itself without compromising the paleness. Here. And you just have to focus on each bit as you get to it. And just don't at any point start thinking, oh, I wish it was finished, or oh, there's so many other bits I haven't got to yet. Just work your way slowly and with focus through it. I was doing some mindfulness exercises recently and I was thinking, gosh, actually drawing and painting has an awful lot to do with all this, the kind of losing yourself in the moment and just very much being involved in the here and now and thinking about what you're doing. Although saying that, with painting, if I started to think, oh, I'm now applying pressure with the paintbrush, I'd probably completely forget how to paint. But it was a link that I thought was quite interesting. Okay, that goes up there like that. And again, look, always looking at your subject. Still need to figure out what's happening here. I think it does this. I think it comes up and around, but I need to make sure there's a white line very prominently. There, that's good. Yeah, that's right. That's not bad. I don't want to take this too much darker, but I do want to suggest, make sure it's understood that that is part of that. You need to make sure that the structure makes sense. What's that meant to be? What even is that? Oh, okay. It's meant to be a part of the sepal. Okay, it's just very badly drawn. Oh well, never mind. Okay, so there we are. I got that bit. Now the next thing I'm going to do is feel slightly panicked. Sorry, it slipped all the way down. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to do a wash over here. So let me just pause for a second and then I'll make a wash and I'll explain it to you before I use it. Okay, so this is the wash I'm going to use and I'm going to work into the midtone. So you see it's quite wet. It's diluted with quite a lot of water. And it's the opera rose again, with a tiny bit of this colour mix and some water. So I often do that. I'll have a mix and then I'll use the mixes I've got to slightly tweak the paint mix. What I always advise people to do is to keep a written note of what goes into their paint mixes. But my life would be an awful lot better if I followed my own instructions. But I don't. You just keep mixing till it looks right, really. I guess it comes with practice. Right, so now I'm going to apply this to get the midtones of the main petal. Let's see how that goes. In centre stage. Yeah, that's more or less all right, isn't it? Okay. Okay, so there's dark down towards there and a bit dark down towards outside towards the edge. So the edge is easier, so I'm going to do that. Just again, do you remember how I did with the little lines? But just with a little more pressure, and this is just a little wetter. Now hopefully though, if I've made this pale enough, the network of veins beneath will show through. So you'll get texture and detail, which also adds to the tonality of the flower. So I'm just going to work my way around the outside perimeter, always looking at the flower to make sure that I'm trying to record it as accurately as possible. Of course, the thing is with nature, you can never really record them accurately because they're so darned beautiful. Everything I ever paint is so much more beautiful than any of my resulting paintings, but there's something wonderful about that. I really enjoy that. Okay, so just, again, following the line of grace, really important to do that because it gives it a fluidity and a reality that if you were just, all your paint marks were going the same way, you wouldn't get. I've got to concentrate here on where the keel changes direction. So you see just out towards the perimeter. Lightness of touch and allowing it just to sit, not messing about with that paint as it sits on the page. And a little bit of variety where the little bits of white are in amongst. I haven't got a problem with that. It actually looks quite nice. And the dark here, if you think about it, that is because of that behind it. This is another thing I always say. There's almost always logic to where your lights and darks are. So I'm going to do that, but I'm going to make sure I'm not too heavy-handed because look, in here there's a much paler area with a bit of green, so I don't want to lose that. So So, okay, I'm using a little more water to make that an even lighter tint now. Okay. And that mostly coincides what's going behind. Okay, so what I did then is I just rinsed my brush completely in cleanish water. Well, it's slightly pink, but cleanish. And that's just taking off the edges. That's softening the edges of that area. Okay, that's all right. That's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. And there's also a little bit of much brighter colour here. So we're going to plot that in. Okay, and then the other side of the petal. Ready? Whee! Told you I turned the page around. But when you turn the page around, I'm afraid I have to rather turn the flower around as well. Okay, so again, working. Got to make sure here. Let's make sure it's centre stage. So building up a network of these midtones. The other thing with these sweet peas, I don't know if the sweet peas that other people paint, if you suffer in the same way, but they change colour. So when you pick them, they're a lovely, gorgeous, bright pink, and as time goes by, they fade. I mean, they do this actually on the plant as well. They become more purple, but it really speeds it up when you pick them. So, as with a lot of botanical specimens, actually getting your colour information down fast is really important because the colours really do change. In an ideal world, you sit and paint out of doors, which is also a real treat, but it's a luxury that it can be quite difficult. And also the problem with it is you often have aphids crawling all over your work, and then you crush an aphid and try and get the stain of a dead aphid off your paper is something which I've never found a solution for. But do be aware of colour change. That's where my rambling began, I believe. Okay, and again, there's this here. Look, darker. That doesn't relate to the flower behind. That just relates to a flush in the petal. Much more sort of magenta, dark pink, just there. So again, I'm going to plot that in. Leaving that very edge where it goes under this bit, leaving that nice and pale, because I don't want to compromise that. And anchor it down there. We like these bits being darker because they look cool when they're a little bit darker. That's fine. Okay, and then this petal behind, I'm going to use the same colour, but with this one, because it's behind and because it's darker, and also this lot is just dried, but because of that, I'm going to cover the whole thing. So literally using that same mix, haven't changed it at all, but now go to the water pot and just diluting it straight from the water pot and bringing that paint out until it's comfortably sitting against the edges. And then I just licked my brush, which you're not meant to do, but it means you can lift paint. So there we go. So the paint is now more or less where I require it to be, which is at the edges. Okay, now I'm going to turn it around so I can see what's going on. Okay, what next? I think we'll work into this bit next. Okay, so my issue now is I want to work into this, and I want to keep it dark, but I really need a bit more of a unification between the dark part and the petals, because right now they look like they've just got nothing to do with each other. So the way to do that is to make sure that I introduce some of these colours into those inner parts. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm just literally, this is the same block of colour I used for putting those little veins in, the first set of veins. So just mixing this up here. I'm not going to mix it in with anything else. I'm just going to use that and work into some of these dark areas. Let's see, where are we? Maybe I should zoom in. What do you reckon? Can I? Yeah, I can. But is it in focus? That's the next question. No, it's not in focus. There we are, that's better. Okay, so here we go. Let's see what happens with this. So layering that colour on top of what I've already painted. Oh, yuck, I don't like those blunt edges. On top of what I've already painted. Keeping my light areas light still, yeah, really important. Okay, working around, looking at the plant, looking at the painting, making sure the consistency of paint is right. What's happening around here? And that goes down to there. Okay. I'm not going to lose that detail, but I'm going to soften it a little. There we are. And then up towards the tip. Again, this very edge bit is going to be a much brighter pink because it really is quite shocking pink. Okay, just make it look natural. Okay, and then same thing on the other bit. Overlapping the white a bit on purpose to make that a gentler transition. Oh, okay, don't go too far, too fast. Keep it light, Lizzie. There we are. And there we go. I'm happy to take this much darker now. I'm going to leave the very tip because I'm going to come and do that in a bright pink. But I want these things to look consistent. There we are. Okay. And you must never forget about, try and take the whole plant as you go along. So now I've mixed up just a slightly sort of purplish blue. So these little bits which are in the shade, in the shadow, I'm going to add a bit to them. So there's a distinction between the lights and the darks. Let's plop them on in. We'll give them a little flush of green later. Oh gosh, I forgot about that bit. That's no good. Well, we know what we're doing there. And yeah, with it being behind, we'll be a little more brash, I think. But again, I don't like these blunt edges. I'm going to have to work into those. I like everything to be gradually blended one colour into another. That can go all the way. I'm happy about that. Yep. Okay, and I'm also now got quite a lot of dark paint on my brush. Just going to knock this back a little bit so you can tell it's behind the main petal. There we are. Oh, that's no good, is it? Right, I'm going to have to work really fast. So now I'm just using my opera pink, almost straight, and a tiny touch of that quinacridine magenta that I couldn't find the word for because I couldn't actually say it. I'm going to come along here and lift this a little. It's annoying me. Okay, a couple of tiny lines so it blends in. Bit more of that there before it sets. Okay, that's better. Okay, so I'm going to let that sit for a second. In the meantime, I'm going to get a bit more opera pink out, and then I'm going to do a similar thing here, working into making this all darks and pinks, and then I'll come back to you when I'm going to work into this again. Okay, so what I'm using right now is literally, it's just straight from the tube, slightly diluted opera pink, and I'm laying it over. I'm still making sure to preserve tiny bits of white because they're what really give the painting a kick. But look, I messed up there, that's no good. But generally we're taking this darker and pinker. The attempt will be to make it kind of glow. Don't know if it's going to work. And those bits that are white, again, going straight to my brush, straight to the water, knocking them back a tiny bit, but I don't want them to get lost. So you can still see they glow a bit. And I have to do the same here. And using again straight opera rose, making that a little clearer what's happening there. And we can knock that back now. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that to be knocked back. Okay, and that top tint will be pure opera pink as well. Okay, so that's all right. What now? Right, now next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put can you see how purple this is already going? It's interesting, isn't it? So I'm going to put a very pale top tint all over this, all over the whole lot. So everything will hopefully still show through if I keep it light enough. But I'm now going to mix using loo paper to clean my paint box. I'm now going to, using the same colours I've been using all along, but I'm going to do a really, really watery tint. So that means lots and lots of water in it. So can you see how much water is going in? So this for now is just pure opera pink. But I'm going to add a tiny bit of this mix I made earlier. Do you remember how I said about cross-fertilising? So this is the one I did for the veins originally, way back when. Because we don't want it too pink. We don't want it sort of silly pink. So carry some across. More water, make it pale and beautiful. Pale and beautiful. There it is, all tinty tint. So look, if you want to see how pale that is, if you apply it to the page, oh, actually I better not do that, should I? Look, I'll use just a random sheet of paper. If you just apply it to a page, it's really quite pale. So I'm now going to lay that on top of what I've done. I'd never enjoy this moment. It always makes me quite anxious, but there we are. Has to be done. So again, as always, we're going to follow the line of growth. And I'm going to do this side first because this side will rest there. I'm going to rest my hand there while I'm doing this side. Oh, God, I hate this. Right. So pulling it all the way out to the edges. Going back for a bit more. Still trying to follow that line of growth. Anchoring it on the outside edges as much as possible. Coming around the corner is going to be a little bit easier for you. There's a nice bit of sweater on there, which is no good at all. If you are painting, do not wear a sweater that sheds. This is a very silly thing to do. I'm going to leave this white because there's a flush of green there that I don't want to lose. Try really hard not to go over the edges, she says, going over the edges. And you can add, in areas that you want to be slightly darker, you can add an extra dollop of this very light tint. Just following the line of growth, pulling it out to the edges and anchoring it along your outside perimeter. Okay, a clean brush. Doing that, I don't want there to be a stark contrast between the areas that have got the pink overwash and the areas that haven't. So it's worked all right on one side, but on the other, it's a bit blotchy. So I'm using a little twist of loo roll, and I'm just lifting that a little bit, almost painting with the tip of the loo roll just to make it less stark. That's all right, I suppose. I'm going to use the same tint on top of here, but I'm going to make absolutely certain that those don't actually touch each other because I don't want them blending into each other. I want them to be distinct entities. And I'm also using the same tint, same tint, to add a little more depth here, but again being careful because there's greenness and yellowness in here that I don't really fancy compromising. I want to leave the white to glow a bit. There we are, that's all right. And this also gets knocked back because it isn't white. Okay, so it's sort of coming together. So what we need to do now is be incredibly patient and allow that pink to dry. So something I always like to do at this point in time is do the stalk. So to do the stalk, I'm going to ignore all the pinks and I'm going to work on the other side of my paint box, and I'm going to mix up a green. So green straight from the pan, green straight from the box are always rubbish. They look nothing like nature. You always have to play around with them a little bit. So this one I'm adding a little bit of That's burnt ochre, I think. And I'm going to add a bit of yellow ochre. Bit more of that, which is sap green. But that's still way too green, so I'm going to add a little bit of cobalt blue. That's looking a bit more like it. Yeah, a bit bluer, I think. Yeah, maybe a bit of brown needs to go in there, I think. Tiny bit of Van Dyke brown. That's more like it. Bit more blue. I spend my whole life doing this. Bit more blue. Tiny bit of down here I've got some kind of what do you call it? It's like a Prussian blue and indigo-y. Oh no, now I've gone too far the other direction. So back we go, repeating what we did before, but in the other direction. There are many people, many botanical illustrators who, when they mix up, they're much, much more together than I am. But I tend to just do it by trial and error until it feels right, which it does now. So while those petals dry, I'm going to do a stem. I was whittering on about leaves earlier. I think I'm going to leave the leaves, otherwise I'm going to spend the whole day doing this. But I'm definitely going to put this bit in because it matters. So with your lights and darks, you always have a slightly darker area of the stem right under where it fixes to the flowering head, to the corolla. Now, do you remember what I said about doing a line, holding your breath and looking to where you're going? That's tough enough, but when you do it with paint on, oh, this is drying wrong. Oh, hang on. Let's make that slightly less glitchy. That doesn't look very nice. That's better. There we go. That's right. That's slightly less. Slightly less. Hold on. Emergency. Whoop whoop. Making sure I get the green off my paintbrush. I just need to soften that a little bit before it sets because I didn't like it very much. It's not great, but it's fine. Right. Back to the green. So load up your brush. I always say the paint should be, well, when I paint, it's the consistency of blood. And then just look where you're going and using a constant pressure, paint that line. Trying to keep it consistent. And of course, what happens is you run out of that kind of muscular movement. So then you have to lift up and then you have to come back. But what I'd advise is when you do that with a very delicate with a very delicate touch, go back over the bit at the bottom bit of the line to have a little more consistency. And then you're already, oh, nastily done, but you're already in the swing of it when you get back into it. You can see I've messed up there. Let's see if we can fix it. Problem with trying to fix things is often you make them worse. Let's leave that. That's not great. Anyway, it's not the end of the world. So generally, the light, traditionally in botanical illustration, the light comes from the top left. So you'll have a heavier line on this side of your stalk than on the other. So you thought it was hard to do that side? Yeah, use a much, much lighter touch on the other side. That tapping, by the way, is the sparrows on the bird feeder right outside my window. I do love them, but they are slightly distracting. Right, now I'm adding a little bit of yellow to the stem mix and a little bit of water to make it waterier. And then literally, that's it. You just pull that paint down the stem, filling in the space between the two lines you've just painted. Working into it a tiny bit, but nothing too much. There you go. It's not bad. That's too thick down there. It's gone wrong. But luckily, you lot can't see where it's gone wrong. Right. Okay. And what's happening up in amongst the structure of the flower? That again, I'm using the slightly yellower green. and anchoring it just here. And then using the same green as I did for the stem, although often they're different, but in this case they're not. Making sure that it's dried, outlining those sepals, putting a bit of detail in if it's relevant. Okay. Sounds like a metronome, doesn't it? Okay, and then I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to darken this one slightly because there's not enough of a distinction between the light side and the dark side. Turn to the dark side, Luke. There we go. Lovely. Well, not that lovely, but it'll do. Right, so now we're at the annoying point where that top wash, because it was so watery, is still drying. And you can see that by, I don't know if you, yeah, you can see. Can you see how it's shiny down there? So if it's still shiny, then that means it's wet. It means you mustn't mess with it, or you mustn't try and do any more detailing, or it'll just sort of smudge in. Though while it's wet, I am going to do a bit of tweaking here because I don't like all these tide lines. I love tide lines against the edge, but when there are tide lines where I don't want them, it makes me very angry. Okay, so we're going to do that bit while it's still drying. So what I'd advise is the temptation is always to come back and start messing too soon, and then you can really, really regret it. So if you can find any possible way of doing something totally different, so either a stem or a leaf, or, you know, I'm go and do my emails, or go and make a cup of tea, or whatever it may be, but just try and leave it until it's fully dry. And when it's dry, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to it, and I'm going to work a little bit more into these edges and into this one behind, and then probably put another top wash possibly over the whole flower. But I'm now just going to give it the space to dry. Right, first apologies for printing out something in the background. That's totally irrelevant, and it'll eventually stop. I've been looking at these while this is dried. It's now dried. I got really fed up and put a fan heater over it because that sometimes helps. But I was looking, and this is just really quite pronounced, this. And I was looking at all my other specimens. It's really important to check across the board. And look how pronounced it is, all on every single one. This is really quite obvious. So I really think I need to do a little bit, a bit more bulking up there. So that's what I'm going to do now. And I've used the same mix. There's opera rose and a bit of that sort of bluish purple. And I'm just going to build into these areas which are just they're just a little heavier in colour than I've drawn them so far. So I'm just going to build up a little network of tiny little strokes, building up the colour as I go, again following the line of growth, always following the line of growth. And again leaving that pale area which we're going to add a jolt of yellow green to eventually. I just need a bit more bulk going on here, you know, a bit more colour, a bit wishy-washy, competing with wishy-washy flowers. Okay. A really light touch, especially towards the edges. Okay, that's a bit better, isn't it? Okay, and then following it. Sorry about this jiggling. The jiggling happens when I when I knock the camera with my head, which is not really what you're meant to be doing. Okay, and again here. Oops. Just a network of tiny little strokes, building up bulk of colour and following the line of growth. Okay, that's better. Yeah, that's a bit better, isn't it? It's already looking a little bit better. And on this side, oops. Oops. This is still, yeah, actually having the painting under the camera might be of use. Where's it go? It's quite low. It comes in here. I don't want to. Oh gosh, that's got a bit weird. Maybe that's still wet. Okay, bringing it in. Oh, that's rubbish, isn't it? Look at that. Line shouldn't be there. I have to hope that it blends in eventually. Moving the angle of the page again, making sure that you guys can still see what I'm up to. Okay, just plotting in more of this dark area, making it feel organic, making it feel like it's not a stark gradation of any sort. Just building depth and depth and depth. Okay. A few longer strokes just to pull it out into the rest of the petal. And then again, see the edge? I'm going to work into those edges and ground them again a bit. Once I've done this all round, I'll get back to you. So I've gone around the edges, and now I'm coming back in again with just, this is again pure opera pink. You've got to love that colour. Just to add real bit of real bulk, and it's got quite a lot of water in this one has. But I just really want that vibrancy that the flower provides to sort of slightly at least come through in my painting. And I'm allowing, can you see I'm allowing the areas of pale to be covered by the different layers of colour. And you also have to bear in mind what you're doing really is you're also doing some optical mixing, so you're tricking the eye into mixing the colour for you, even though in fact it's made of lots of different layers of colour on the page. You need to keep an eye on what you're doing, so even though you're working on the micro scale, you need to be aware of what's happening on the macro scale, that you're not messing everything up, which quite often happens. I think maybe I'm doing now. I need to step back. Hang on. No, it's not too bad. Just a little bit more in the middle. Better. Blending, 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 just getting it all to look a bit less stark. A bit there. Still not quite as bright on this side. This side hasn't worked as well as the other one, which is annoying. Okay, and I'm going to have a little look. This one needs a little bit of pink as well. Go on. Not a lot there. Just enough to give it a bit of bulk. There, that's nice, isn't it? Oh. Okay, and I'm now going to use the same opera pink, and I'm going to go over our whites here. Hopefully they'll still glow. It's always a terrifying moment. But if it works, it feels great, because you can see they go from having little blotches of white to just glowing. There we are. And I'm going to copy that. Bring a little bit of that colour down there as well, so it's not too stark on the eye. Okay. Yeah, that's right. We're getting there. We're not there yet. So now I'm going to do another top wash, very similar to the first one. Maybe with a little more. This is going to be a bit more opera pink. I need to not be fooled by what's happening with the flower colour. I'm going to pick another one from the garden in a second. Okay, so now I've got again a very wishy-washy pink to go on top, and I'm going to put that over the whole lot, which you'll see now. And I'm going to rotate the page. So if you I've now got to a point where I don't want to mess this up. So if the page disappears, if I turn it off the page, don't take it personally. Oh, I don't know if that's right. A bit more pink. A bit more water. Come on, don't lose your whites, Lizzie. Let everything glow. Just layering it, following the line of growth, anchoring it on those edges, which by now are really getting quite nice and crisp and dark from where they've been worked and worked and worked. Right. There we come. Following, don't want these little sort of bits of white there. Yeah, that's all right. I'm going to turn it this way now. I like to paint towards myself when I'm doing this, and it also means that this edge of petal I'm wittering on about, it means that it's where the brush stroke finishes, which makes it easier in terms of painting when you want to ground your wash on the outside edge, if that makes sense. I hope it does. Okay, excellent, that's all right. Okay, I'm going to turn it around this way again, so it's sitting upright on the page. A little bit extra there, a little bit extra there. What's going on here? There's a bit of a wash going in here, as I think, as well, but without losing that white. Let's just be a bit more honest about the colours. And here as well, but I'm pulling those out away because I don't want them to mingle in with that big wet wash. So now, irritatingly, what we've got to do is, you know it, you've got to let it dry. So play about a little bit with the stalk if you want to, whatever. But the best thing to do, look, the colours are getting there. They're still not great, but they're getting there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let that dry, and then I think we really are very nearly at the point where I'm going to just put a little bit of yellow and green on the whites and call it a day. Okay, so this is more or less dried now. And I've also, while it was drying, you can probably tell, I've picked into some of the darker darks in amongst here, using a sort of a purple. But now what I'm going to do is introduce these little greeny yellow bits down there. So to do that, I'm going to use, that's me mixing up cadmium yellow with a tiny bit of sap green. So here, let me show you what colour. Do make sure you wash your brushes between dealing with things like pinks and greens, because otherwise you're just going to get really mucky. So there we go. That's the, you see it? Can't see whether I'm on the screen or not. Yeah, there we are. So that's the colour I'm going to be using. Tiny bit more green. Okay. So again, back to that our good old sturdy plant, which is doing us so well. And it's not very pronounced. It really is very discreet, these little bits of green. They're tiny. Just a suggestion. Really, smallest of marks will do. And down here. And then this bit here, they're down at the base, so I'm going to do that. Goes there. And then they're down there, working their way up, and you can see it makes it look more natural with the sepals as well. I'm going to continue that line. You can't just drop a line, it doesn't make any sense. Make sure it all makes sense biologically, botanically. Okay. And now, hear me wash that brush. Now I'm going to use clean water, although it's slightly beige. I'm going to use cleanish water to just soften these edges. I'm going to put literally so little pink in it that it's almost pure water. But these need to be softened, these corners. So I'm going to do that now. See, just pulling out. Pulling out. Oh, please don't do anything weird, paint. At this point in proceedings. It's all right. So if you have the wrong watercolour paper, which luckily I don't have, if you have the wrong watercolour paper at this point in time, you might find that all sorts of lumps of detail start lifting off, which is horrible. Kind of done it a little bit here. Yeah, it has done. That's annoying. It doesn't normally do that. Anyway, doesn't matter particularly. But that can, if you have a really, some watercolour papers are really bad for that. So be careful with what paper you choose. Like I say, I use Fluid 100. I'm just going to put that back in there because it was a mess. There we go. Nobody will ever know. So now I think I've got I mean, it's not perfect. It will never be perfect because nature is so much more beautiful than anything I can do. And I love nature for that. I'm going to put a very pale bluish purple wash. Whoops, sorry about the wriggling. Yeah. But with more of a tint, more water in it, on the dark areas now. Just over the whole darn lot. Okay. And here. Excellent. And now I'm going to mix up a shadowy. So that is normally, for me, that's normally a purple. So it tends to be something like ultramarine mixed in with a bluish purple. And I end up with a colour. I'm going to mix it and then I'll show it to you. Generally, my sort of shadowy colour. Oops. Is something along these lines. So I'm going to use that, and I'm not going to use a lot of it, but it's just going to pick out the darkest dark. So here we go, a little bit here, and here where it casts the shadow, here, here, a little bit here where the overlap is. Being decisive. If you make sort of wishy-washy lines at this point in time, then it's just going to look a bit rubbish. I'm going to have a bit of a drop shadow here. I think definitely a little bit of distinction here. Not sure about that drop shadow. I'm going to soften that off. More water. Bit more water. Oh, stop it. I want that paint to move down. There we are. That's better. That's fine. I haven't got a problem with that. And now for these bits here, those innermost workings, I'm going to mix up really quite a much thicker dark, because they really are very, very dark. And then just plot them in. And again, when you're coming to putting your darkest darks in, be so careful. So easy to go too dark too fast. Okay, a little bit there to help the eye along. And soften it off a tiny bit. I need to put my glasses on for this bit, but I won't. Okay. Oh dear. Okay. I'm going to use a bit of tissue here because that's gone a bit too dark. You know what I said about using it like a paintbrush? Lift it off like a paintbrush as well, and don't panic. Never worth panicking. And then a tippity tip in here. Okay. These really are now finishing touches, to be honest with you. This is the point at which I know I need to down brushes, because the risk of overworking is very high. I may have already overworked, but I think we've probably got away with it. So there we go. I would say that's more or less finished. So where's our beloved specimen here. So it's faded a little bit. It's got a bit more purple. Even so, it's still a lot more beautiful than my illustration. Such a pretty plant. So lovely. But a real joy to paint. And, you know, it's just a matter of taking the time to do it. So hopefully this has been of some use to you guys. Do let me know how you get on. And if I've made any glaring mistakes or done stupid things or not been clear, do get back to me, leave a comment, and I will endeavour to reply. But thank you very much for sitting through it. You're very patient and I appreciate it.